My entire life, I grew up playing sports. And I was not the strongest kid. I was not the fastest kid. But I could do one thing really well. And the one thing I could do really well was throw. In football, I played quarterback. In my senior year, we went to the Idaho 5A state championship football game. I know you guys think that's a huge deal. I know, you pretty much know a celebrity in the house today. I'm just kidding. But in that game, our team was all offense and no defense. So we ended up losing 35-41. In baseball, I was a pitcher. In my senior year, I got offered a college baseball scholarship. In my first ever workout with my college team, the pitching coach had a radar gun. And after the workout, he ran up to me and said, "Max, do you have any idea how fast you just threw?" I said, "I have no idea. How fast did I throw?" And he informed me that I had hit multiple times 89 miles per hour on the radar gun. And he said, "Max, you are really skinny. And if we can just put a little bit more muscle on you, and if we can just get you a little bit stronger, and if we can get you from 89 to 90, 91, 92, 93, there's a good chance that you could get drafted and you could go and play professional baseball." Who knows, for every 18-year-old kid, that is the dream. And so I decided for my first year of college as I was entering in that I am going to fully devote myself to this. I am going to gain weight and put on strength like I've never put on strength before. I started taking protein powder, weight gainer, creatine. I didn't do illegal steroids. I know you guys were wondering. But I worked out harder than I've ever worked out before in my life. I doubled my calorie intake. So if I was eating a bowl of cereal, I ate 2 bowls of cereal. If I was eating 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, I ate 4. If I was eating 1, some of you guys know what I'm talking about, the $5 footlong. Anybody remember the Subway jingle? 5, $5. See, some of you guys know what I'm talking about. But if I was going to eat 1 of those, I would eat 2 of those. And I ate so much food that I got sick at times because I was trying to force so many calories into my body. My senior year of high school, I never squatted more than 225 pounds. At the end of my first year of college, I squatted 405 pounds. I had never really been able to gain weight in high school, but by the end of my time in college, of that first year, I had gone from weighing 170 pounds to weighing 208 pounds. I put on 38 pounds of muscle in 1 year. Now, why this was incredibly fascinating to me was that for 4 years of high school, I tried to gain weight. I worked out, I drank protein shakes, I did all this stuff, and I didn't really put on much of any weight at all. But somehow, in 1 year, I put on exponentially more weight and strength than I'd put on the previous 4 years combined. My body was growing so quickly, I actually started to get some stretch marks on my skin because my body was growing faster than it had ever grown before. And it was interesting because what I found out is that it's not the amount of time you work out for that makes your muscles grow. You can work out for years and not get any stronger. Or you can work out for 6 months and get exponentially stronger. And it's like that with our physical bodies, but it's also like that in the things of the Spirit. That time does not equal spiritual maturity. You can be a Christian for a year, and you can see exponential growth in the things of the Spirit. Or you could be a Christian for 40 years and pretty much be in the same place you started at. Time does not equal maturity. Growth is less about where you're at, and it's more about how committed you are. And even more than that, it's about who you're committed to. When I was in college, what made the difference between 4 years of high school, working out and not gaining any weight, to 1 year of college, gaining exponential weight compared to what I was used to, the difference is I got around people who were much stronger than I was. And I got around people who had put on a lot of weight. And so I started working out with the strongest guys on the baseball team. I started taking the supplements that they were taking. I started working out with the track and field team, the guys that did shot put, javelin. These guys were jacked. And I started to hang around them. And as I started spending time with the people who I wanted to become like, I started to become like them. I started to be able to put weight on and gain strength. The difference was when I got around the right people. Even outside of church, people admit this. There's this cliche saying, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Or I've often heard it said that you will become like the 5 people that you spend the most time around. The people you hang out determines who you're going to become. And way too many Christians in the world today have disconnected and isolated themselves from the body of Christ. Imagine there was a flower and it was growing in the ground in spring, not today. But imagine it's in the ground, it's growing, it's thriving, it's got everything it needs, and imagine you go in and cut the stem and take it out. What's going to happen to that flower? It's going to look okay for a couple hours. If you put it in a glass of water, maybe a couple days. But eventually, it is going to shrivel up and it is going to start fading away because you've taken it out of the environment it was created to reside in. And it's like that for you and I in regards to the people that God's placed in our lives, in regards to Jesus' church. If you take a Christian out of the church, you've taken them out of the environment they were created to thrive in. And I think in today's day and age, I'm grateful for technology. Everybody online, I love you guys. It's okay to listen to pastor sermons and listen to videos online. That's great. But if that's a substitute for being engaged in a healthy local church, then it becomes a problem. Because T.D. Jakes has some great messages, but T.D. Jakes is not going to come visit you in the hospital when you're sick. Carrie Job has some fantastic worship music. I hope you worship at home to music. But Carrie Job is not going to show up to your wedding. Stephen Furtick is a fantastic communicator. But when you are struggling in your marriage or in your workplace or in a relationship, you are not going to be able to call Stephen Furtick up and have him talk you through that. But people in Jesus' church, if you pour your life into them, will be there for you. The question is, which environment will you place yourself in? I think a lot of Christians, to use a football metaphor, there's a lot of armchair quarterback Christians. They sit at home on the couch. They're not in the game. They're not getting stronger. They're not training. They're not exercising. They're critiquing what everybody else is doing, but they're not actually in the game. They've isolated themselves. And then you've got Christians that are actually in the game. They're training. They're contributing. They're jumping in. They're investing. And what happens to those guys is they get stronger and they grow. I brought a weight today. I thought about bringing a really heavy one and then having someone try and lift it, and then I decided against it. Maybe next week. But when you work out, what are you doing to your muscle? You are putting it under stress. You are putting it under tension. It is a lot easier to sit at home on the couch watching the Chicago Bears play. It is a whole lot. Okay, it's not easy to watch the Chicago Bears play. You're a Cowboys fan, though. Yeah. It is not a lot of physical effort to watch the Cowboys lose or to watch the Bears lose. But for those guys that are on the team, they're training, they're working out, they're exercising, they're putting their bodies under stress and under tension to try to get stronger. And I think a lot of Christians run away from anything that's got stress or tension or resistance or might seem hard. And what happens is when we do that, we remove ourselves out of the environment where we can build strength, and then we don't grow. Far too many Christians want to grow spiritually, but aren't willing to do the work that's required in order to experience that growth. The title of the message today is How to Grow Spiritually. Last week we talked about prayer and fasting. We talked about Jesus fasting in the wilderness. And we're in a season of 21 days of prayer and fasting. At the end of Jesus coming out of the desert, the first thing he does, we're going to pick it up right here in Matthew 4, right after he comes out of the wilderness. It says, from that time on, Jesus began to preach, repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near. So Jesus comes out of fasting, begins his public ministry declaring the kingdom of heaven has come. That it's right here, right now. It's amongst us. It's in our midst. And the first thing Jesus does, it tells us as he was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net in the lake, for they were fishermen. We're going to look at this passage and we're going to ask ourselves 3 questions that are going to help us to build spiritual muscle. The first question is your primary focus yourself or is it others? Jesus walked around and he noticed 2 brothers. Jesus was notorious for constantly having his eyes out to focus on other people. He sees these 2 brothers and he goes over to them. In another story, he sees a guy named Zacchaeus up in a tree. And he goes, Zacchaeus, I see you, come down, let's have dinner. Jesus always had his eyes out for other people. When I moved to New York City for my first ever job out of college, I was so excited. And I had become a Christian at 18 years old. And I was a part of a church. I grew exponentially in the things of the Spirit. But when I went off to college, I did not get involved in a local church. I did not get the right people around me. And what happened is not only did I not grow, I actually regressed and took a step back. And so right before I moved from Seattle, Washington to New York City, what happened is I made a decision. I said, God, I'm not happy with the direction my life is going. I repent, God. I come back to you. I want to rededicate my life to you. And so I've just moved to New York City. I've just rededicated my life to Jesus. I walked into a church, and it was 30 people meeting in an apartment. And I walked in, and a guy named Josh came up to me and said, hey, nice to meet you. Do you want to have sushi with me afterwards? Now, I know a lot of you guys don't think an invite for sushi is spiritual, but if Josh had not invited me out for sushi, I don't know if I ever would have gotten involved in that church. If I hadn't gotten involved in that church in New York, I wouldn't have gone to Bible college in Australia. If I hadn't gone to Bible college in Australia, I wouldn't have moved to London, met Juliet. We wouldn't have moved to Chicago, and Elan Church would not exist. So Elan Church exists because a guy named Josh in New York invited me out for sushi. But what I love about Josh is Josh was constantly looking out for other people. He was constantly pouring his life into other people. And so when Josh moved away to go back home to where he lives at in Australia, Josh's going away party was packed. There were so many people that wanted to show up to celebrate Josh because he constantly had his eyes open on other people, and he had poured so much in that it was overwhelming the number of friends Josh had. The Bible puts it this way. It says, don't be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. Whatever we sow is what we're going to reap. I think so many people want the benefits of a godly community, but they're not willing to invest into building it. I don't think Eric and Monet are here today. They might be watching online. But I wanted to take a moment and just honor Eric and Monet, who we prayed for last week as a church, who've gone through our difficult past few weeks. And what Juliet and I observed from Eric and Monet is for the first year they were involved in our church, they sowed in. They jumped into community. They served on team. They had people in their home for dinner, and they poured into so many people. So over the past few weeks, as they've been navigating some things, the response from our church to them has been overwhelming. So many people showing up, wanted to help them and bless them and care for them and do whatever they can to help. And the reason is that Eric and Monet sowed in so much to other people's lives that when it came time where they needed some things, they were able to reap what they've sowed. And so I want to encourage every single person here that whatever it is that you want to reap, you have to take the first step to start sowing. If you want good friends, the first step towards getting good friends is being a good friend. If you want people to notice you and to invite you to hang out, why don't you look around and try and notice other people and invite them to hang out? Whatever it is that you want to receive, we need to do the work of sowing and investing that into other people. The story continues. Jesus notices them, and then he says this. He says, "Come, follow me." The second question to ask ourselves is your primary focus on things or is it on people? Come and follow me. You know what I find fascinating about Jesus' life? What did Jesus collect? What did he accumulate? What did he amass during his time on earth? There's not really any record of Jesus amassing money, though money's not a bad thing. There's not really any record of Jesus accumulating physical possessions or things, though obviously we need stuff in life. But the only thing that Jesus accumulated, the only thing that Jesus poured his life into and made his life about was people this side of eternity. Jesus was constantly collecting and accumulating people. And he encouraged his disciples to do likewise. He said this, "Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal." Josh, I'm not going to hold it against you for stealing my verse, wherever you are. "But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal." What is treasures in heaven? You and I came into this world with nothing. And when we die, we don't get to keep any of the stuff that we have, any of the things. The only thing that comes with us is people. Treasures in heaven is people. It's God's most valuable, most prized possession. And Jesus constantly made his life about other people. When I was 16 years old, I met a youth pastor named Dave. And Dave invested 2 years into my life. I was kind of a punk. I used to argue with him about how I didn't think the Bible was real and how I didn't understand any of this Jesus stuff, and it made no sense to me, and I thought Christians were weird. I still kind of think Christians are weird. But I used to argue with him for 2 years. He invested into me, and like a punk kid. And at the end of those 2 years, I made a decision to follow Jesus. It took 2 years of Dave pouring into my life, answering questions, many of them stupid ones. It took 2 years, and finally I made a decision to say, you know what, this makes sense to me. I want to give my life to Jesus. And I think so often in our Christian walk, what I can say for Dave is it would not have been easy to invest 2 years into a 16-year-old kid. That's why Juliet and I are so passionate about starting up youth and students, because kids are searching for things today. They're trying to figure out where should they go and what should they do. And if we can help young people today to put Jesus at the center of their life, it will allow them to step into the life God has for them, and it will also save them from a lot of destructive decisions they would have otherwise made. But it was not easy for Dave to be a youth pastor. It was not easy for Dave to pour into my life. And I think sometimes as we start working out and we start exercising our muscles and we start pouring into other people, what happens is it gets difficult. We get tired. I'm tired of doing this. It's uncomfortable. I don't want to keep doing it. And what happens is we give up, but it's only through continuing to exercise and putting our muscles under stress and strain that they begin to grow. If you do a couple of workouts and you're like, hey, I'm kind of maybe starting to get a little bit tired, I'm going to quit, there's no strength involved. And I think sometimes in life, we think that our Christian walk with Jesus is going to be easy all the time. And it's not. There's going to be stress and strain and resistance and discomfort, and we need to be able to push through and navigate those things. You know what the best thing about church is? Other than the presence of God? The people. You know what the hardest thing about church is? The people. Because people can be difficult. And so as we're pouring our lives into other people, what happens is it gets hard. We get stressed, we can get tired, we can get fatigued, and we start to feel it, but it's in that we're actually building muscle. The truth is that the church community, the church of Jesus Christ, is the gym God has placed you in to exercise and to build spiritual muscle. And your muscles only grow under tension, under pressure, under stress. And so I want to encourage you to pour your life into other people, even when it gets uncomfortable. Because it's uncomfortable to let other people in. It's uncomfortable to care for people who may or may not care for you back the same way, but it's in that we begin to build spiritual muscle. The Bible story continues in Matthew 4. Jesus says, "Come follow me," and then it continues, "and I will send you out to fish for people." The third question to ask is your primary focus comfort or is it mission? Is your primary focus comfort or mission? And the worship team can come and join. I will send you out to fish for people. Peter is one of these first two disciples that Jesus calls. And not long into Jesus' ministry, Jesus asks the question. And Peter answers and gets the answer right. And Jesus says this to them. He says, "Blessed are you, Simon or Peter, son of Jonah. This was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not stand against it." How many of you would love to have Jesus say that to you? Well done. Good job. I'm sure he was feeling great about himself. What happens 5 verses later? Peter says something that's a little bit off. And what Jesus says to him is, "Get behind me, Satan." A little bit of a shift. "You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." So he goes from praising him, saying that was a great answer, you got it, to "get behind me, Satan." Following Jesus was not comfortable. If you were following Jesus, you better stay on your toes. If you're following Jesus today, we better stay on our toes and be ready. We live in a world today that values comfort above all else. Everything is about making me feel good, making me comfortable. But the truth is that if you and I choose to live a life of comfort, we will end up sleepwalking through life. We will end up moving through life on autopilot, and we will miss out on what God wants to do. The church community is not designed to make you comfortable. It is designed to make you uncomfortable. It's precisely the reason why a lot of people want to jump out of it, because it's uncomfortable. Being a part of a church is a little bit like taking 2 diamonds and throwing them in a tumble dryer. And the diamonds initially have rough edges, and you chuck them in the dryer, and the dryer starts spinning. The diamonds are clanking each other, they're hitting the walls, there's friction, there's heat, there's tension. But over the course of time, if the diamonds will stick it out, what happens is the rough edges get knocked off of those diamonds. And then the diamonds come out the other side smooth and pure and without blemish. But the diamonds have to be able to and willing to endure going through that process. And it's a little bit like that for you and I. The Bible talks about iron sharpening iron. Everybody wants to be sharp, but nobody wants to get sharpened. It's not very fun. Everybody wants the rough edges knocked off or wants to be clean and pure on the other side, but nobody wants to go through the process of getting those rough edges knocked off. But the truth is, you will only grow to the level of discomfort that you are willing to endure. If you and I jump out when it gets a little bit difficult, we're never going to push through to the other side. It's like that in marriage. It's like that in our relationships. It's like that in our relationship with God. It's like that in our involvement in the church. Jesus never promised us a comfortable life. That's why we're doing 21 days of prayer and fasting. Fasting is designed to make us uncomfortable. I feel like eating food, but I'm not going to. It's designed to make us uncomfortable so that we can become less tethered to the things of the world and more tethered to the things of God. And so my encouragement to you is to choose mission over comfort. And Jesus' mission is all about people. If you and I want to follow Jesus, we need to make our life about pouring in to people. We're launching community groups here in a couple weeks' time. Next week, we're going to get all of our community group leaders up and introduce everybody and talk through everything. But my encouragement to you this season is to join a community group. Groups meet in homes all across the Naperville area. And my encouragement to you, sometimes when we pitch community groups, it's join a group so that you can grow in your faith and you can make good friends and you can get stuff. My encouragement to you for joining community groups this semester is don't join a group for what you can get or what you can reap. Join a community group for what you can sow, for what you can pour in. Because whatever you pour into it is what you're going to get out of it. I think we have a slide on the screen. You can sign up at elan.church/groups. We'll send out a text and an email as well. But following Jesus requires getting out of our comfort zone. And we do community groups because that's the way the early believers did them. In the book of Acts, it tells us day after day they met in the temple courts and from house to house. The temple courts is those large gatherings where they all came together. That's what we're doing right now. This is large corporate worship gatherings. The other place they met is in house to house. They met in community groups. It's the biblical model of community. And in our community groups, we do 3 things. We make time to hang out and have social time, to hang out, to build friendships. The Bible would use the term the breaking of bread and fellowship. We make time to do that. The second thing we do is we make time to study the Bible. The early believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, which is the Bible, and so do we. And the third thing that we do is we make time for ministry time, or the Bible would say prayer. They devoted themselves to prayer. So we minister, we pray to one another. That's why we need community groups. And so I want to encourage you to join a community group. We're going to sing a song together. We're going to come out and pray for a couple different groups of people. But my encouragement to you is it's not should I join a community group or am I going to join a community group? The question is, what community group am I going to join?